Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So it is officially August, so it is time for my July 2021 monthly wrap-up. July was an awesome month for me book-wise. I'm really happy about it. July is my birthday month, so every July I try and just pick books that I really have wanted to read, have heard about, I'm excited to read. And a lot of times I stay away from books that are like trending or like new, or I want to read to like suss it out, to feel it out or whatnot. I just pick books that month that I'm fairly certain are going to be really high rated reads for me, and then pray for the best. And this month they really were. I have one 5-star read and every other book is a 4-star read, so very excited about that. They are 4-star reads with a couple little footnotes that I want to add about why they are rated the way that they are, but I will go through that as it goes on. All right, so let's start up with Goblin. This is Goblin by Josh Malerman. This is the first book that I read. It is a novel in 6 novellas, as it says right here. And I did get this in a recent Nightworms package. I will link that up above. And this is my second time reading Josh Malerman. I read Bird Box earlier in the year and wasn't thrilled with it, but it did have some moments that were really scary and really well written, which made me not want to stray away from Josh Malerman. So I was really excited to read this because I really wanted to see what he could do kind of in the short story realm. What I liked about this, if you guys know, I don't really like reading short story collections. I love reading short stories, but I feel like collections for me are usually so like hit or miss with the story, so it gets a little like jumbled. So I did like that these were all thematic about the one fictional town of Goblin. And I did love a lot of the stories, and I did dislike several of the stories as well. I found there's a frame story that introduces everything that's not one of the 6 novellas, and it was really creepy. It was very ambiguous. It kept me on the edge of my seat. It felt very fast-paced, and I really enjoyed that. But this is also a collection of 6 stories with the titles A Man in Slices, which was okay for me. It felt very cliche. It's definitely a story that was very predictable that I've heard before. Camp, which is a story that just didn't work for me. About it, and I will read what that one's about. It says, Walter Camp is afraid of everything, but most afraid of being scared to death. As he sets traps around his home to catch the ghosts that haunt him, he learns that nothing is more terrifying than fear itself. This one just didn't quite work for me. I didn't really like the premise. I didn't like the execution. Then we got Happy Birthday Hunter. This one I did enjoy a little bit. What is that short story? Like The Greatest Game or The Greatest Hunt. It gave me like serious vibes on that. I really liked it. It had a very dismal ending. Then we get to Presto, and it says, all Peter wants is to be like his hero, Roman Emperor, the greatest magician in the world. When the famous magician comes to Goblin, Peter discovers that not all magic is simply an illusion. I really loved this story. This was my favorite out of all of them. I felt very invested in the characters. I could have read a whole novel on Roman Emperor, as well as our protagonist in that story, Peter. I thought they were both very compelling characters, really fun. The ending was a little bit of a letdown for me. I kind of wish that more had been explained. It was left on the kind of this like, not a cliffhanger, but just like a very bleak conclusion. But it was great. I really enjoyed it. A mix up at the zoo. The zookeeper feels a mysterious kinship with the animals in his care and finds that his work is freeing dark forces inside of him. This is another story that I felt was extremely predictable. I feel like I had read it before. Again, it was written very well, but it was just another story that I felt like I already knew. And then The Hedges, which is what the cover of this book is about. I really liked The Hedges. This story was fun. It wasn't predictable. I was really taken for a ride reading it. I thought things were going one way and they were going a completely different way. This one almost like, it wasn't fully cosmic horror, but it definitely had these like kind of cosmic elements in it, which normally I wouldn't like, but it really added to the creepiness of this story. It was very weird, but I would absolutely read more about Goblin. I really like the town. I thought the way that the novel, or I thought the way that this collection like weaved the town in as this full character of like mystery, and all of the chapters were alluding to other things that would happen later on in other stories. I thought was really, really well done. This was fun, this was quick, this was easy, and I really liked it for the most part. So Josh Malerman gets a little gold star for me because this impressed me way more than Bird Box. Okay, the next up is Survive the Night by Riley Sager. I did do a full review video on this, as this is a new release that just came out. I really like Riley Sager. Again, 4-star read for me. This is the story about a woman who gets in a carpool, like ride share, with a man she doesn't really know from her college, and finds out that he might be a serial killer. It's set in 1991, and I loved this. I talk a lot about this in my in-depth review, which I will link above. But I really, really liked this. This is very like standard Riley Sager. Lots of twists, lots of turns, lots of you're not quite sure what's happening until the very, very end. I will say this one was definitely more predictable than his other books, which is a little bit refreshing for me, because I feel like when I've read his other stories and the twist ending comes like out of left field and you're like, whoa, I didn't see that coming at all. It was nice to have one where I was like almost satisfied that I was able to figure out what was happening, but I didn't feel cheated or that it was too obvious as to what was going on. Very, very solid read, very, very creepy. Definitely great for like fans of true crime. I think you would really enjoy this. Our protagonist, I think her name was Charlie. Yeah, our protagonist makes a lot of questionable decisions that push the plot forward, that from like somebody who like listens to tons of true crime podcasts, the whole time I was reading the book, I was like, don't do that, please don't do that, you need to run. And of course she is not a dumb character, but she does make some questionable decisions, and I thought that it was written very well, very believable, and again, just a really, really fun read. Okay, third was Amina and the Undead by Amy McCaw. I've talked about this book a bunch on my channel because I did that giveaway with Amy last month, and I hadn't read it before. I had just heard really, really good things, and this is a YA book about a girl who comes to visit her sister in New Orleans, and all of a sudden these mysterious murders start happening, and they try and figure out who is behind this and what's actually going on and why certain people are being targeted, and maybe there's vampires involved. I don't know. I loved this book. YA is really one of those things that I don't really gravitate towards. I know I've said this before, but like my 2020 top read was Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Cesare, which is a YA book, but I don't truly believe it's a YA book because it doesn't have any of like the YA cliches, apart from the fact that all of the characters are teenagers, but it is like a B-movie slasher fest, so I kind of understand that. But with this does have a couple of those YA tendencies where there's a lot of like teen romance, which is really just not a thing I gravitate towards. But once I overlooked all of like the romance and the love and the like discovering who you are as a teenager, this was such a great read. Amy did such an amazing job of capturing what New Orleans feels like. And New Orleans is one of my favorite places in the world, so I really felt like I was on Bourbon Street and down by the water and, you know, in the cemeteries. Like, I thought this was so well done. The way she talks about the architecture and like the life of the city, like I just loved this novel. I really loved reading about a place that I really like, and I really liked her spin on vampires. This book was also set in the 90s. A lot of my books actually this month were set in the 90s or other time periods, but I was very pleased with this. I thought this was really fun, very well executed, and I highly recommend it. Even if you're not into YA, because again, I'm not into YA, I think you will enjoy this because it is a very cool vampire story. The setting, again, is just absolutely incredible. And I liked the twists and turns that this one had, and our characters were really fun and interesting and very unique. And I like reading books about like young adults that the characters don't feel generic or one-dimensional. Like they felt like very real, substantial, unique individuals. Okay. So then I read The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. I want to talk about my rating for this one. This is a 4-star read because as a book as a whole, this book was fine. This is a love letter to slasher films, much in the same way as My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones is. However, I think My Heart is a Chainsaw, which comes out at the end of the month, guys, was far superior to this. I have my hesitations about this. This is a 4-star read as a book in general. For a Grady Hendrix novel, this is more of like a 2-3 star read for me. I think Grady Hendrix could have done so much more with this book and didn't. This book is set in 2010. It is the story of 6 women who are all surviving final girls. They survived their like slasher event that was then like turned into movies and exploited and made them kind of famous, and now somebody else is coming after them. I really thought this book, and again, I have a whole video on this. I will link that up above so you guys can watch me really ramble in depth on it. I really thought this book was going to be a slasher story, and it's just not. I didn't find the characters likable, and I thought there was, like, again, it's a fine story, but Grady Hendrix is so good at balancing, like, humor with, like, flashback nostalgia with horror, and kind of all of that was gone. There was no, like, early mid-2000s nostalgia in this novel, even though it was set in 2010. The humor was literally only in places where if you had an in-depth knowledge of slasher films, you would kind of get where his, like, humorous side was coming out. And then the horror just wasn't really there. It was like a slasher movie without any of the blood and guts in it. So, underwhelmed with this as a Hendrix novel. As just a regular story, this was fine. I read this on the beach. I wanted to keep reading it. Like, I didn't ever feel the need to put it down or, like, step away from it. So I gave it a 4 stars as being an enjoyable book, but on a Hendrix level, definitely the weakest thing I have read from Hendrix, I think. I don't know. I wasn't the biggest fan of horror story either, so they're kind of both there, but nowhere near as great as My Best Friend's Exorcism or even Southern Book Club's Guys Slaying Vampires. Okay, so my 5th book of the month was The Lost Village by Camilla Sten. Again, I do have an entire video on this as well. This is a relatively new release. It came out in April, I believe. Was originally released in 2019, I believe in Swedish, so the English translation was just released here. This is great. This is a slow burn gothic Blair Witch meets Midsummer kind of tale about documentary filmmakers in an abandoned town in Sweden who are trying to figure out what happened to all of the villagers back in, I believe, like the 50s, because they all just mysteriously disappear. This is really interesting. This is not a character-driven story. This is very much like a setting, atmosphere-driven story, and it's very creepy. I thought Camilla Sten did a really incredible job at making you feel like you were isolated the way that these documentary filmmakers were isolated. I thought she did an amazing job of playing with uncertainty and being afraid of the unknown, and again, heavy on the isolation. And I really enjoyed the, there's like a weird kind of culty aspect in this book, and I really liked that. I do like reading books about cults. I think they're fascinating, and I think it's really cool to see the inception of the cult to the actual like downfall of the cult, and I think that this book does an incredible job of that. Very impressed with this. Again, if you're not into slow burns, slow gothic reads, maybe stay away from this, but I thought this was fantastic. Definite 4-star read from me. Last but not least, I did a buddy read with Black Acre Doe. We will be having joint reviews going up later on in the month on this bad boy, but I am so happy I read this. This is a 5-star read from me. This is a coming-of-age horror story by Tim Meyer, who is slowly becoming one of my favorite authors. I didn't want to put this down. This book is like It, like Stephen King's It, meets Coraline in New Jersey. This book was so good, and I don't want to go too much into it because, again, I will be having an entire video dedicated to just this book. I read it in about a week. It is pretty hefty. It's like just under 600 pages, but this book is absolutely phenomenal. I will say that as a book as a whole, 5 stars. When it comes to like coming of age horror, because that's again my favorite genre of book of all time, hold that on a really high pedestal. I would give it more of like a 4.5. It is not at the level of greatness as It, but it's also not at the level of greatness as December Park by Ronald Malfi, which is another one of my favorites. But it does come very close. I loved this. I thought the I don't even know what I would call it. I guess the monster in this was so utterly terrifying, so creepy, so well written. Kind of in the sense that like It and Pennywise borderline on like the cosmic horror elements. This has that kind of undertone of cosmic horror, but didn't feel like a cosmic horror story, which I was very, very happy about. So if you're into cosmic horror, you might like this, you might not. It really teeters on that edge. I know Tim Meyer does that in a lot of his books, but it really, really works for me. But yeah, this is the story about 3 kids on their summer vacation who live in a town right off the Jersey Shore and realize that a lot of their friends are getting very, very sick, and they're not quite sure why or what's happening, but the sickness is not like ordinary cancer. It is causing people to do some really, really strange things, and they want to find out why. And I just loved this. I thought the characters were really fun to read about. They were not the most individualized characters. They kind of grew into their own as the book went on, but they were really, really fun to read about. They did some very like interesting things. Again, this is another book that was set in the 90s, was set in 1998, so I really, really enjoyed the background of this story. And I thought it was very creative and individual. You can see where Tim Meyer pulled a lot of inspiration from. Stephen King especially, he throws like 4 different nods to Stephen King in this book alone. But with these nods, like, he definitely drew inspiration from King, but he didn't steal from King. So like, I really like Brian Keene's novel Ghoul, which is a great coming of age story, but I feel like he really ripped off a lot of Stephen King's characterizations and plot devices, whereas in Malignant Summer by Tim Meyer, I feel like he was just very inspired by the way King writes and like the tones that King uses. So I never felt like he was ever stealing from any other author that I've read, but I do feel that you can see heavy, heavy influences from people like Stephen King and Neil Gaiman, hence my Coraline comparison. Again, I really don't want to get too much into this because I will be doing a full in-depth video very, very soon on that. But this is a 5-star read. Tim Meyer is really becoming one of my favorite contemporary authors. I know I just said that, but I highly, highly, highly recommend reading his work. This is by far the best thing I've read from him so far. He released Paradise Club earlier this year, which I thought was great. If you're into slashers and cosmic horror, pick that one up. Switch House was good, and then Wormwood, which is his collaboration with Chad Lutzke, is another sort of coming-of-age horror, but not in the way that this one is, where it is like a group of kids fighting a monster. Like, that is the soul of this book, and I loved it. I loved it so, so, so much, and I'm so, so happy I picked it up. But yeah, that is all that I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, I post every Monday and Thursday, and if you enjoy these videos, please hit that like and subscribe button down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Mwah.